Okay, we'll move on now to the next question.
Well, the question isn't really just from me, the question's probably from all of us. How do you think higher education should be financed?
How should higher education be financed? Okay, we'll start with Chloe this time.
The first thing I would like to see on higher education is that question actually put to a public policy test. I think there's an opportunity for it to be left in the long grass, and we need to bring it right back centre. And I would like that to be a cross-party effort, because I suspect you'll get interesting answers from all of us. My personal view is that the student has to bear a cost of it, as does the state. It's got to be a blended approach. There are no extremes in this. I don't think as a country can afford to pay for everybody's higher education. And the reason I say that is I don't think it's fair to pay for a millionaire's child's higher education. What I do think is fair is that graduates who can expect to earn a significant amount more than non-graduates over their economic lifetime should take on some cost of that. So I think it's got to be a mixture of those two things. I'd be actually really interested in your view, because I know from my personal view, I'm still paying off my student loan. You know, I'm in the generation that had a student loan. I certainly didn't benefit from a grant. I came after that. So I may actually, I suppose, conceivably be one of the few politicians in the House who actually has a student loan. But there we are. So I think I'm relatively comfortable with my status as having a student loan that I'm still paying off, because I know that it's done me well over my lifetime, and I'm confident that other graduates take something with them from that. So I think it's got to be a mixture of those two things. My party thinks the same, and my party wants to see the review of student tuition fees brought to the centre as a cross-party question, so that we can all go through that before the next election.
No, we'll go to Adrian next. Adrian.
Thank you. I think that higher education should be funded as a public service, free at the point of delivery, and I'll talk you through why I think that. I think it's a very serious point. It's about equal access to education regardless of the background that you're from. And the argument's often put that if you earn more as a result of your degree, then why shouldn't you pay something back towards that education, pay something back towards society? And I agree that if you do earn more as a result of your degree or for any other reason, then of course you should pay back more towards public services. That's what income tax is there for. That's why we should have a higher income tax for those on the highest incomes, and that should be used to fund public services in a fair way, because income tax is the fairest form of taxation that we have. And I don't just want it to be put in place in order to abolish fees. I think we also need to be bringing back grants. We need to be making it easy for people from any background to access higher education. And we certainly need to be opposing the plans that are on the table from some parties at the moment to increase the level of top-up fees. I think the argument about a millionaire's son is really quite a false one. We've got to stick with the principle of free at the point of delivery. You wouldn't say that in terms of the NHS, someone, if they're from a rich background, should have to bring out their debit card when they arrive at hospital before they're given some sort of treatment, or that they should have to have some sort of private insurance like is in the US. Education should be a public service, free at the point of delivery as well. And when top-up fees were brought in by Charles Clarke, the MP for Norwich South, who I'm fighting at the general election, they were brought in when he was Education Secretary and I was studying here at UEA and was one of the students in the campaign against it. We need just a strong campaign from students now ahead of this general election, because there are parties who would increase top-up fees if they got in. We need to resist that.
So you're in favour of abolishing? You're in favour of abolishing?
Abolishing all fees and bringing back grants.
And you're in favour of a review?
May I make one minor point on that? It's something that might be of interest to the theoreticians in the room.
Yes.
Where you say, where you draw the distinction with health, or the parallel with health, I find that really interesting. And I'm going to open this up to the floor to see if people agree with me. Yeah. I think there is a fundamental difference between health, indeed, I'm sure, between healthcare and education, which is that beyond a certain level of basic education, education is actually a choice. Me turning up to the hospital with my, some awful injury is not a choice. I need treatment there on the spot. There's no getting around that, whether I was a millionaire or whether I was somebody on the street. Education is that choice, and it's therefore something that can be planned for. Now, I, like you, don't want to see people put off education because they feel it's a financial burden. I would like to see those things spread out in a way that is affordable and attractive to people. But it is not the same as healthcare, because it's not an immediate emergency on the spot.
No, it's interesting. We can have an interesting political philosophy discussion.
We could,
which I'm not going to do, but I'll give you one.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that argument's logical, but I don't agree with it, because I think it's about the sort of society we want, and that's where health and education are similar. It's about ensuring that whatever background you're from, you have access to healthcare. Whatever background you're from, you're not put off higher education through the fees.
Phil, we'll just stick with fees for the time being, not the NHS.
No, I'm not going to go to the NHS. I mean, I would agree with Adrian that this would be better funded out of general taxation if every single person was able to benefit from it. About 45% of people go to university. The Labour government's got an aspiration of that raising to 50, which the Tories oppose. But even then, if we achieve that, only half of people would gain from this system. And I think things that are funded out of general taxation, every single person should have access to. So if we could afford it, I would love to see a system where all young people aged 18 were given a fund, an education fund that they could use to spend on education or on an apprenticeship or on setting up a small business or whatever. So every single person has a fund that they can spend. But if we have decided that we can't afford that, particularly in the current economic climate, and people have got to make a contribution because only a few people, a minority at the moment, are benefiting from it, then my two conditions on that are, one, you don't pay anything up front, and two, if you are going to pay it back, it's only the cost of what you actually gained from university, not just forevermore paying through a higher rate of tax. And I think the current NUS proposals, which I think are really sensible and really realistic, and I hope the government listens to, and I hope all parties listen to actually in the review that's currently taking place, that people pay back in a progressive way, linked to their income, linked to their ability to pay, but only through the cost of actually what their course cost across their lifetime. That isn't a debt, so you're not in debt at any point. It is just you're paying back through the income tax system throughout your life. It is a really fair and equitable proposal. I would love us to abolish all of that and pay it all out of general taxation, but actually I don't think it would be fair for example, my brother who's a carpenter to have had to pay for all his own equipment and a generator and a van and all the tools to become a carpenter and go through an apprenticeship, had to pay for all of that himself. He couldn't borrow it. He'd have loved to have got into debt to borrow that. He couldn't. You only through a non-commercial means. I mean, he had to borrow it through a bank in appalling commercial terms. He's not eligible for this through general taxation. So I think we either pay for it for everybody, some form of education fund, or we go with the NUS proposals where you do pay some of it back, but you don't do it. You never get into debt at the start. You're paying it back throughout your working life.
Okay, well, we've got lots of comments on that, so we'll start with the lady just over here, please.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask you, so who exactly benefits in society from the government spending our taxes on war?
Thank you. And to the gentleman with the green top, just to...
I think I agree semi what Phil was saying. I think the issue is that all of society does benefit from higher education. If you have a graduate tax model, we wouldn't say if a graduate develops a cure for cancer, we'll only let graduates use it. So I think it is really disingenuous to imply that only those that go to university benefit from higher education, which is why I think that education should be free at the point of use and should be paid through progressive taxation for everyone.
Thank you. And just one more comment.
Is it right to encourage 50% of young people to go to university when we have an economy which is incredibly short of skilled people in areas like IT and even basic things like plumbing and electricians?